The cameras were rolling, the stage was set, and millions of people across the world were glued to their screens, waiting for what was supposed to be just another high-profile interview. But no one, absolutely no one, was prepared for what would happen next. Elon Musk, the billionaire tech mogul, sat confidently in his chair, his signature smirk resting on his face. Across from him, Keanu Reeves, the beloved Hollywood icon, remained calm, his hands folded in his lap, his expression unreadable. The tension in the air was subtle, but undeniable. It had started as a light-hearted conversation, talks about artificial intelligence, the future of technology, and even a few jokes about Tesla's latest innovations. But then, things took a turn. It began with a simple question from the host. Elon, what do you think of actors like Keanu Reeves, who have become cultural icons but don't really contribute to science or technological progress? Elon chuckled. A quiet, almost dismissive laugh. Then, leaning forward, he said, "Look, I respect entertainment. It's great for passing the time. But let's be real, what does it really do? Does it push humanity forward? Does it solve the big problems we're facing? I mean, movies are fun, but at the end of the day, they're just stories. They don't change the world." The words hung in the air. A murmur rippled through the live audience. Some people nodded, as if agreeing with Musk's logic. Others exchanged nervous glances, sensing the shift in energy. Keanu, however, didn't react immediately. He simply tilted his head slightly, as if processing Musk's words, his deep, thoughtful eyes locked on the billionaire. The host, sensing the unease, turned to Keanu. "Keanu, do you have anything to say to that?" For a moment, it seemed like he might just brush it off. But then, slowly, he leaned forward. His voice was calm, steady, but there was something beneath it, a quiet intensity. "That's an interesting perspective, Elon," he said. "But let me ask you something. What moves people? What gives them hope? When a person is struggling, when they feel lost, do they turn to machines? Or do they turn to stories, to art, to something that reminds them they're not alone?" The audience went silent. Elon's smirk twitched just a little, as if he wasn't expecting this kind of pushback. But Keanu wasn't finished. "You build rockets, and that's incredible. You push the boundaries of technology, and that's important. But technology without humanity? Progress without meaning? That's just noise. You talk about changing the world, but what kind of world are we creating if we forget the very thing that makes us human?" The tension was now thick enough to cut with a knife. Even the host seemed caught off guard by the depth of Keanu's response. But before Elon could reply, Keanu leaned back, a small, knowing smile on his face. The silence stretched for just a beat too long, and then Elon Musk laughed. Not a dismissive chuckle this time, but a real, amused laugh. He shook his head slightly, as if both impressed and challenged. "All right," he said, raising his hands in mock surrender. "I didn't expect that." But just as it seemed like the moment had settled, Keanu picked up his microphone, looked straight into the camera, and said something that made the entire audience gasp, something that would send shockwaves across the internet and change the entire course of the interview. And that's when everything really exploded. The room was dead silent. Every pair of eyes in the audience, every camera lens, every live-streaming viewer across the world was waiting, hanging on to Keanu's next words. Elon's confident smirk had faded just a little, his fingers drumming lightly against the table. The energy in the room had shifted, what started as a casual discussion had turned into something much bigger. Keanu exhaled slowly, letting the weight of the moment settle. Then, looking straight into the camera, he said, "You can build all the technology you want. But at the end of the day, if people don't have a reason to care, what's the point?" The audience reacted instantly. A murmur spread through the crowd, some people whispering to one another, others nodding, absorbing the words. Elon tilted his head slightly, a flicker of something unreadable in his expression. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe irritation. Maybe both. The host, clearly aware of the brewing tension, cleared his throat and jumped in. "That's a strong statement, Keanu. Are you saying technology doesn't matter? Keanu shook his head. No. It matters. A lot. But the question is, who does it serve? What does it serve? We keep chasing the next breakthrough, the next innovation, but for what? More profit? More efficiency? What about the people who are struggling just to feel something real? Elon folded his arms, finally speaking again. I get what you're saying. But let's be honest, movies, stories, entertainment, they don't solve real problems. They don't feed the hungry. They don't stop climate change. They don't take us to Mars. Keanu let out a quiet chuckle, shaking his head. You think that's all people need? Food? A planet to escape to? What about the soul? What about purpose? His voice softened, but there was something piercing in his gaze. I've met people who told me that a movie saved their life. That a story helped them survive the darkest moments of their existence. Art doesn't feed the body, Elon. It feeds the spirit. And without that, what are we? Elon hesitated for just a moment. A crack in his otherwise unshakable confidence. He was a man used to debating, used to proving people wrong with cold, hard logic. But this was different. Keanu wasn't just arguing, he was making people feel something. The host, sensing the electricity in the air, turned back to Elon. Elon, you've been known to have strong opinions about the future of humanity. What do you say to that? Do you think stories and movies can really shape the world? Elon leaned forward, his expression sharp but not dismissive. Look, I respect Keanu. He's an incredible actor. And I get that stories are powerful. But let's talk facts. The world is changing, fast. AI, robotics, space travel, these are the things that will define the future. And I don't see how sitting around watching movies is going to help anyone prepare for that. There was a slight edge in his tone now, a subtle challenge. The audience felt it too. They weren't just watching a conversation anymore, they were watching a clash of two completely different philosophies. Keanu took a slow breath, then smiled. You know, Elon. I remember watching interviews of you years ago. You used to talk about dreaming big, about believing in things people said were impossible. But somewhere along the way, it feels like you started believing that only one kind of progress matters. That only technology can save us. He paused, studying Elon's expression. But what if technology isn't enough? What if we still need something deeper? Elon's fingers tapped lightly against the armrest of his chair. For the first time, he didn't have an immediate response. The audience could feel the weight of the moment. Some leaned in closer, barely blinking. The live chat on the streaming platforms was exploding with reactions, some people defending Musk's vision of the future, others rallying behind Keanu's heartfelt words. And then, just as it seemed like the tension might break, the host glanced at the timer, realizing they were running over schedule. He hesitated, then said, Gentlemen, I hate to interrupt, but we have to wrap this segment up soon. Any final thoughts? Elon exhaled sharply, as if snapping out of deep thought. He looked at Keanu, then at the host, and finally at the audience. Then, in a voice quieter than before but still firm, he said, Maybe the future isn't just about technology. But that doesn't mean we stop pushing forward. Keanu nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. And maybe pushing forward isn't just about what we build. Maybe it's also about what we believe in. The host clapped his hands together, clearly relieved that the conversation hadn't escalated further. Well, this has been an incredible discussion. Two brilliant minds, two different perspectives. I have a feeling people will be talking about this for a long time. The audience applauded, but the energy in the room was still charged, like an unresolved chord in a song. Even as the show went to a commercial break, the tension lingered. And the real storm? That was still coming. Because moments later, behind the scenes, off-camera, Elon Musk and Keanu Reeves had one last exchange. And what Keanu said next? That would send shockwaves across the internet. As the cameras cut to commercial, the audience buzzed with excitement. Some turned to their neighbors, whispering about what they had just witnessed. Online, social media was already exploding. Clips of Keanu and Elon's exchange were being shared at lightning speed, with people choosing sides, debating, and dissecting every word. Backstage, the atmosphere was different. The polished set, the bright studio lights, it all felt distant now. Here, in the quiet corridors behind the scenes, things were more raw, more real. Keanu walked calmly, his usual relaxed demeanor intact, but there was a weight in his steps. Elon, on the other hand, moved with purpose, his mind clearly racing. "Keanu," Elon called out, his voice carrying an edge of curiosity, maybe even frustration. Keanu stopped, turning slowly. "Yeah?" Elon studied him for a second before speaking. "You really believe that? That stories and movies have the same impact as actual innovation? That they change the world the way technology does?" Keanu didn't answer right away. He just held Elon's gaze, as if considering something deeper. "Let me ask you something, Elon," he said finally. "What's the most important invention of the last 100 years? Elon raised an eyebrow. "That's subjective. The internet, maybe. Or artificial intelligence. Space exploration." Keanu nodded. "Okay. And what about the most important story?" Elon frowned slightly, as if the question caught him off guard. "I don't know. There's no way to measure that. That's the point." Keanu crossed his arms, his voice calm but firm. "We measure progress by numbers. By data. By what can be built, what can be coded, what can be launched into space. But we don't measure the things that keep people going when all of that feels meaningless. You say stories don't change the world, but they do something even more important, they change people." Elon opened his mouth to respond, but Keanu wasn't done. "Think about it. Why do people dream about space in the first place? Why do they believe in the impossible? It's not just because of science. It's because of stories. Stories made us look up at the stars before we even knew how to reach them. Stories made people fight for a better future when the odds were impossible. Your technology is incredible, Elon. But without the stories that give people a reason to care, all of this..." He motioned around them vaguely. "It's just machinery." A silence stretched between them. Elon's expression didn't shift, but there was something in his eyes, something unreadable, almost distant. For a man who was always so sure of his words, always ready with a sharp reply, he now seemed thoughtful. But before he could say anything, the studio producer approached them, headset on, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Musk, Mr. Reeves, just a heads up, the next segment is getting rescheduled. Apparently, the network wants to extend the post-show panel discussion. People are really reacting to your debate." Elon nodded absently, his mind clearly elsewhere. Keanu simply offered a polite smile. The producer hesitated, then leaned in slightly. "Just so you both know, this is already trending worldwide. Whatever happens next, people are watching." And with that, she was gone. Elon let out a small chuckle, shaking his head. "Well," he muttered, more to himself than to Keanu. "Looks like we started something." Keanu smirked. "Maybe the real question is, are you ready to finish it?" Elon glanced at him, the fire in his eyes reigniting. "Oh, I don't back down from a challenge." Keanu nodded, as if he expected nothing less. But just as he turned to walk away, Elon called out one last time. "You talk about stories like they're the heart of everything," Elon said. "But what happens when the story people believe in is wrong?" Keanu stopped mid-step. The question lingered between them, heavier than anything that had been said before. And as Keanu turned back around, a slow, knowing smile crossed his lips. "That," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "is exactly why the right stories matter." Neither of them said another word. But the world? The world was just getting started. The world couldn't stop talking. Social media platforms were on fire, headlines flashing across every major news outlet. Keanu versus Elon, the debate that shook the internet. Some called it the ultimate clash between vision and soul, between logic and emotion. Others saw it as a battle between two icons of modern culture, each representing a different kind of future. But no matter which side people were on, one thing was clear: this conversation wasn't over. Backstage, as the studio emptied, Elon scrolled through his phone, skimming through thousands of tweets, reactions, and opinion pieces. The debate had sparked something bigger than he expected. He was used to controversy, used to criticism, but this time, something felt different. People weren't just arguing over facts, they were questioning something deeper. Keanu, meanwhile, had disappeared from the public eye for a few days, as he often did. No press statements, no follow-ups, nothing. He wasn't the type to chase attention. But when he did return, he made sure it mattered. And that moment came when he agreed to a live-streamed follow-up discussion, one that Elon Musk himself had challenged him to. The internet exploded again. Keanu and Elon, round 2. It wasn't just another debate anymore. It had become a movement. The day of the live event arrived, and the anticipation was electric. Millions tuned in, waiting, watching. The setting was different this time: no polished studio, no scripted segments. Just a raw, unscripted conversation, broadcasted live. 2 chairs. 2 men. And a world watching. Elon leaned forward, hands clasped, his expression unreadable. "All right, Keanu," he started. "No audience, no host. Just us. So tell me, what's your real problem with the way I see the future?" Keanu took a deep breath, his gaze steady. "I don't have a problem with your vision, Elon. I have a problem with the idea that technology is the only answer. That progress is just about what we build, instead of what we believe in." Elon smirked. "That's where we disagree. Because belief doesn't change reality. Innovation does." Keanu shook his head, a quiet chuckle escaping his lips. "Then tell me this: why do people dream about the future in the first place? Why do they want to go to Mars? Why do they fight for a better world? It's not because of science alone. It's because of hope. And hope is built on stories." Elon's jaw tightened. "And what happens when hope isn't enough? What happens when reality is brutal, when survival depends on action, not dreams?" Keanu met his gaze, unshaken. "Then you have to give people a reason to keep going. Not just with machines. Not just with numbers. With something that reminds them why they even care." A silence stretched between them. The live chat was moving at lightning speed, comments flooding in from people on both sides. Some agreed with Elon, arguing that science and innovation were the only ways to push humanity forward. Others sided with Keanu, insisting that a future without meaning was just an empty pursuit. And then, just as the tension reached its peak, Elon leaned back in his chair, studying Keanu with something close to curiosity. "You really believe this, don't you?" Keanu nodded, his voice calm but firm. "With everything I have." Elon exhaled sharply, as if wrestling with something internally. Then he said, "Then prove it." The world held its breath. Keanu held Elon's gaze, sensing the weight of those 2 words. Then prove it. The challenge wasn't just rhetorical, it was an invitation, a test. But before he could respond, something unexpected happened. The live stream glitched for a split second, the screen flickering before returning to normal. It was barely noticeable, but sharp-eyed viewers caught it immediately. The chat erupted. "Did anyone else see that? Glitch? Or something more? No way this is a coincidence." Keanu glanced at Elon, who narrowed his eyes slightly, as if sensing something was off. But they had no time to dwell on it. The conversation had already escalated beyond just words. Now, it was about action. Elon leaned forward, a small smirk playing at the corner of his lips. "You say stories shape the world. That they give people purpose. But the thing is, Keanu, stories can also be manipulated. Narratives can be controlled. So let's ask the real question: who's controlling this one?" Keanu frowned slightly, caught off guard. What do you mean? Elon gestured vaguely toward the screen, toward the flood of comments, the chaos of opinions. This isn't just a debate anymore. It's a battleground. People aren't just watching, they're picking sides. And I don't think either of us started this fire. Someone else did. Keanu's mind raced. The debate had exploded beyond anything he'd expected, sure. But now that Elon said it out loud, something about it did feel manufactured. As if someone had fanned the flames just enough to turn this from a conversation into a war. And then, another flicker on the screen. This time, it lasted longer. The feed distorted for a full second before snapping back. A few comments were immediately deleted from the chat, their messages unreadable. Then more. Messages vanishing before anyone could screenshot them. Keanu's stomach tightened. He wasn't the paranoid type, but he had seen enough to recognize when something was being controlled. Elon, however, looked intrigued. Ah, he murmured, almost to himself. So it's them. Keanu's eyes narrowed. Who's them? Elon exhaled, glancing toward something off-camera. I've had my fair share of enemies, Keanu. People who don't like when I shake the status quo. But this? This is something else. Keanu could feel the energy in the room shift. The tension had moved beyond their debate, it had spilled into something neither of them fully understood yet. And the audience? They were hooked. The live chat exploded again. Wait, who's deleting comments? This is bigger than we thought. Are we being watched right now? Keanu sat back, processing. You think someone's using this debate for their own agenda? Elon nodded, his expression sharp. Not think. I know. And just like that, the stakes had changed. This wasn't just about ideas anymore. This was about who was pulling the strings behind them. Keanu studied Elon's face, searching for any sign of exaggeration, but there was none. The air between them felt heavier now, the conversation shifting from an intellectual debate to something far more real. If someone was manipulating this whole event, the question was, why? And more importantly, who? Then, without warning, the live stream cut to black. For 3 full seconds, nothing. No sound. No visuals. Just darkness. The millions of viewers watching were left in stunned silence. Then, just as suddenly, the feed snapped back on. But something was different. The chat had vanished. The comments section was gone. The flood of reactions, the heated discussions, everything wiped clean in an instant. And when the video returned, Keanu and Elon were no longer alone. A new voice entered the conversation. Calm. Measured. But undeniably chilling. Gentlemen, the voice said, we appreciate the discussion, but it's time to bring this to a close. Keanu turned sharply, looking off-screen. Elon, however, didn't seem surprised. He leaned back slightly, exhaling. Took you long enough, he muttered. Keanu's pulse quickened. Whoever was behind this, Elon knew them. A shadowy figure stepped into the frame, not a random hacker, not some internet troll. No, this was different. The presence alone felt calculated, intentional. A man in a sharp suit, his expression unreadable, stood between them. This debate has sparked more engagement than we anticipated, the man continued. And while we admire a spirited discussion, certain narratives are best left unchallenged. Keanu's jaw tightened. You're saying someone didn't want this debate to happen? The man offered a thin smile. Let's just say there are larger interests at play. Elon let out a small chuckle, shaking his head. Ah. So that's it. You let the fire burn just long enough to keep people entertained, but the moment it gets too real, you pull the plug. The man didn't confirm or deny it. He simply reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device, pressing a button. Immediately, the live stream froze. Viewers saw a final, distorted frame of Elon and Keanu before the entire broadcast was abruptly terminated. For the millions watching, the screen went dark. The video was gone. No replay. No explanation. Just an eerie silence where the biggest debate of the year had once been. Keanu turned back to the man, his voice steady. You can erase the footage. You can shut down the discussion. But you can't change what people saw. You can't unmake the questions we've raised. The man tilted his head slightly, as if considering his words. Then, with a small nod, he simply said, "We'll see." And just like that, he walked away. Elon exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. Well, he muttered, that was fun. Keanu watched the man disappear, a strange sense of unease settling in. This wasn't just about a debate anymore. Something far bigger was at play. And even though the live stream was gone, the truth had already escaped into the world. Because people had seen. People had witnessed it. And some things, once seen, can never be unseen. Keanu and Elon sat in silence for a moment, the weight of what had just happened settling between them. The cameras were off. The debate was erased. But neither of them could shake the feeling that something much larger had just unfolded, something neither of them had full control over. Elon sighed and leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Well, that escalated quickly. Keanu gave a small, dry chuckle, but his mind was still racing. The way the stream had been shut down, the way the mysterious man had walked in as if he owned the conversation, it was clear this wasn't just about them. Someone, somewhere, had been watching from the very beginning, deciding how much of their words were allowed to be heard. They thought cutting the stream would erase everything, Keanu said, his voice thoughtful. But that's not how the world works anymore. Elon glanced at him. You think people will still talk about it? Keanu nodded. They already are. Someone recorded the stream. Someone saved screenshots. They always do. Elon smirked. The internet never forgets. Outside the studio, the world was already reacting. The blackout of the debate only fueled the fire, making people even more determined to find out the truth. Clips of the conversation started surfacing on social media, fragments of their words spreading like wildfire. The more the video was taken down, the more copies appeared elsewhere. Hashtags exploded, hashtag what did they erase, hashtag Keanu versus Elon, hashtag truth shutdown. People weren't just discussing the debate anymore. They were questioning why it had been silenced. Who had the power to shut down something this big? And more importantly, what were they afraid of? Keanu pulled out his phone and scrolled through the chaos online. He wasn't surprised. This was bigger than either of them now. The moment had already escaped control. Elon stood up, stretching. So, what happens now? Keanu locked his phone and stood as well. We keep going. Elon raised an eyebrow. Meaning? Keanu met his gaze, a small but knowing smile forming. We don't let them control the story. Elon chuckled. I like the way you think. And just like that, the conversation between them wasn't over. It was just beginning. Over the next few days, news outlets scrambled to piece together what had happened. Some dismissed it as a simple technical failure. Others speculated that it was intentional censorship. But the one thing no one could deny was that people were paying attention. More figures started weighing in, philosophers, scientists, artists, and tech leaders, all debating the same fundamental question: who controls the future? Is it technology, shaping the world with innovation? Or is it human belief, shaping it through meaning and stories? Keanu and Elon both continued their lives, but neither of them escaped the impact of that night. They found themselves at the center of something much bigger than a debate. Invitations poured in for follow-up discussions, interviews, and forums. People weren't just entertained by their exchange, they were inspired by it. And somewhere, in the shadows, the forces that had tried to shut it down watched as the conversation refused to die. Because no matter how much power someone holds, no matter how many systems they control, an idea, once set free, can never be truly erased.